They say North Dakota sleeps quietly under its vast, whispering plains, but that's not true. Beneath the wheat fields and silent highways, something ancient hums, something restless. The land remembers. From the badlands carved by forgotten rivers to the lonely schoolhouses left to rot on prairie winds, ghosts have claimed their corners of this cold northern state. The stories here don't just echo, they breathe. Soldiers who never stop marching, lovers who never stop waiting, children who never stop crying. Tonight, we'll trace the haunted spine of North Dakota, 12 legends born from real people and real tragedies, now twisted by decades of fear and folklore. Their names are still spoken in gas stations, hunting lodges, and small-town diners. Locals say they've seen things that science can't neatly fold away. Some of these spirits mourn, some linger out of rage, and some seem to be waiting for someone to notice them again. We'll start where the state itself began, a place where war, winter, and guilt never really left. Legend 1, the ghosts of Fort Abraham Lincoln. They say if you stand on the bluffs above the Missouri River at dusk, you can hear the faint clatter of cavalry boots. The air goes colder, as if the river itself is holding its breath. This is Fort Abraham Lincoln, built in the 1870s near present-day Mandang. It was here that Lieutenant Colonel George Custer and the 7th Cavalry prepared for their fatal march to the Little Bighorn. The fort bustled once with soldiers and families, but after Custer's fall, the place became a skeleton of grief. Widows were left behind in the officers' quarters, staring out windows that faced the endless plains. Visitors say those widows never left. They speak of pale women seen through the glass of the old commander's house, brushing their hair in candlelight. Tour guides hear footsteps pacing the wooden floors after hours. Once, a ranger reported the sound of a bugle echoing from the parade ground, though no one was there. Skeptics say the sounds are tricks of wind and structure, that North Dakota's open plains play strange games with echoes. Locals aren't so sure. They leave flowers on the steps every June, the anniversary of the battle. Some claim that when fog rolls in from the river, the outlines of horses appear in the mist riders headless, their silhouettes fading toward Montana. The living and the dead, still marching toward history's edge. No one knows if they ever made peace. Maybe they're still out there, chasing a battle they never won. Legend 2, the Lady in White of Riverside Cemetery. They call her the Bride Who Waits. Locals in Fargo whisper her name softly, like it might summon the sound of lace rustling in the dark. Riverside Cemetery, oldest in the city, dates back to the late 1800s, a patch of quiet land overlooking the Red River. Among its cracked headstones stands a small marble angel, eroded by more than a century of wind. That's where the Lady in White appears. Her story begins in 1898. A young woman named Anna Petrovich was to be married to a local shopkeeper. The wedding never happened. The groom's carriage overturned in a spring flood on his way to the church. He drowned, and she shattered, walked to the cemetery in her gown, and never came home. Days later, they found her frozen near the gate, her white dress stiff as porcelain. Since then, countless visitors have claimed to see her wandering the grounds, the faint shimmer of silk drifting between the graves. In 1932, a gravedigger swore he spoke with her, a woman, asking where her husband's plot had been moved. He left town the next day. In 1976, 2 college students reported seeing a glowing figure kneeling beside the angel statue. When they returned in daylight, they found wet footprints leading nowhere. Skeptics talk about humidity, light refraction, the mind's tendency to find patterns in fog. Paranormal investigators, though, recorded cold spots and untraceable electromagnetic bursts near her monument. One psychic described the feeling as someone pressing sorrow into your chest. The city has tried to discourage ghost hunters, vandalism, litter, all the usual mess. But every year, on her wedding date, locals leave white roses by the angel. The petals are always gone by morning. They say she still waits, still walks the narrow paths, clutching the veil that time refused to lift. Maybe she's not lost, maybe she's just searching for the only promise death couldn't keep. Legend 3, the Phantom of the Sand Haven Sanatorium. They say Sand Haven was built for healing and ended up swallowing the very souls it tried to save. In the Turtle Mountains near Dunsafe stand the ruins of Sand Haven Sanatorium, opened in 1912 as a refuge for tuberculosis patients. At its peak, over 1,000 people lived there: doctors, nurses, the sick, and the dying. When antibiotics came, the sanatorium emptied, and silence replaced the echo of footsteps in its long, tiled corridors. But not all who enter left. Visitors today describe a pressure in the air, like the building still breathes. Locals claim to hear coughing from empty rooms, wheelchairs rolling across broken floors, and doors that slam when there's no wind. A former security guard told of a pale figure in a nurse's uniform standing by a shattered window watching him until he fled. Teenagers who sneak in speak of flickering lights, the smell of antiseptic, and something whispering their names from the stairwell. Skeptics point to old ventilation shafts and animals nesting in the walls, but even they go quiet when they see the flicker of lanterns deep inside the abandoned wharves. The Turtle Mountain Chippewa believe the land itself became a vessel for grief, every scream and prayer soaked into the soil. Now, the hospital stands hollow against the sky, its windows' dark eyes staring down the valley. Some nights, people say, the lights come on again, glowing faint and sickly green. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's something waiting to be cured. Legend 4. The Vanishing Hitchhiker of Sentinel Butte. Every North Dakotan who drives a lonely stretch of Highway 16 knows the rule. If you see a girl in a blue dress by the roadside after midnight, don't stop. The story began in the 1930 seconds, when a young woman named Mary Halverson was traveling from Beach to Sentinel Butte for a dance. A storm hit. Her car skidded off the gravel road, and she was found dead the next morning, her blue chiffon dress torn by rain and glass. Locals buried her near the hill she never reached. Ever since, truckers and travelers have reported the same eerie scene. A girl in a soaked blue dress appears by the highway, waving for help. Her eyes are pale and pleading. Some claim she climbs into the passenger seat, silent, shivering. When the driver turns to speak, she's gone, leaving only the smell of wet lilac or a faint chill in the cab. In 1964, a farmer found muddy footprints on his truck's floorboards after giving a hitchhiker a ride that never happened. In 1999, a state trooper swore a woman vanished from his backseat mid-transport. Skeptics blame fatigue, fog, and long miles of isolation. Psychologists call it the road mirage effect. But people still see her. Locals leave flowers by the curve where her car went off the road, and even those who laugh about it drive faster through that stretch. They say she's still looking for a ride home, but maybe the road no longer leads where she wants to go. Legend 5. The Burning Ghosts of Walsh County Bridge. On quiet nights near Minto, the old iron bridge over Forest River hums with something that isn't winged. Locals call it the Screaming Bridge, though its real name has long been forgotten. In 1933, a school bus carrying children to a Halloween party skidded on the icy crossing and plunged into the river below. The water swallowed it whole before rescuers could arrive. Only the driver survived. The man haunted until his death. Repeating that, he heard laughter turning into screams. Afterward, the bridge was rebuilt, but people claimed it was cursed. Travelers say if you stop there around midnight, you'll hear the sound of metal twisting and children crying. Sometimes headlights reflect faces in the river. Once, a deputy patrolling the area swore he saw a burning bus drifting just beneath the surface, glowing orange, then vanishing. In the 1970 seconds, teenagers reported tire tracks ending in the middle of the bridge, no car, no footprints, just the smell of smoke. Skeptics say it's swamp gas, headlights refracting the mist, or just the power of suggestion. But fire crews have been called there dozens of times for phantom blazes no one can find. The county closed the bridge years ago, yet flowers and tiny toys still appear on its rusted railing. They say the children never stop riding, that their laughter still echoes in the cold water forever on their way to a party that never began. Legend 6. The Cursed Grave of Flickertail Mary in Minot. If you wander through Rose Hill Cemetery in Minot after sundown, you might see a faint, flickering light drifting between the stones. Locals say it's Flickertail Mary, North Dakota's most restless soul. The story starts in 1914. Mary Wainwright, a young woman accused of witchcraft after several unexplained barn fires, was found dead in her home, the building mysteriously unburned except for her body. The townsfolk bury her in an unmarked grave on the cemetery's edge, hoping the distance will keep her spirit quiet. It didn't. By the 1922nd, gravediggers refused to work near her plot after reports of glowing orbs and sudden gusts that blew out lanterns. In 1947, a caretaker saw a woman in scorched clothing walking the path, her eyes like candle flames. He quit that night. Modern visitors tell of phones freezing, car engines dying, or voices whispering their names from the shadows. Paranormal groups caught a strange heat signature hovering above the soil as if the earth itself was breathing fire. Skeptics call it a local myth built on guilt and gossip. But every few years, someone leaves matches or candles on her grave, never flowers. It's said those who take anything from the site suffer small fires in their homes afterward. Maybe Mary's curse isn't revenge. Maybe she's still trying to burn away the lies that bury her. Either way, her light hasn't gone out. It just flickers, waiting for someone brave enough to look closer. Legend 7. The Ghost Train of Enderlin. Every fall, when the fog crawls in from the Cheyenne River Valley, people in Enderlin say the rails start to sing again. The tracks there haven't carried passengers in decades, yet a train still roars through unseen but deafening. The legend dates back to 1893, when the freight train derailed on a sharp curve just outside town. The conductor, Thomas Avery, stayed aboard to brake the cars, saving his crew but dying in the explosion. When rescuers reached the wreck, they found his pocket watch still ticking, its glass melted. Locals said his spirit never left the line he protected. Since then, farmers and night shift workers have heard the distant whistle of a train that never comes. Hunters camping nearby claim the ground trembles, and the rush of wind passes then nothing. In 1961, a local teacher said she saw a headlight beam slice through the fog before vanishing over empty rails. Modern ghost hunters recorded vibrations minutes before midnight, the same time Avery's train crashed. Skeptics blame seismic rumbles and wind currents trapped in the valley. Railroad enthusiasts call it metal memory, some bouncing between old bridges. Yet no one stays long after dark. Some say Avery still drives his phantom train through the prairie, doomed to follow tracks that lead nowhere. Others believe he's warning travelers to stay clear, a ghost keeping watch over the living. Either way, when the whistle calls, everyone in Enderlin listens and locks their doors. The Weeping Widow of Pembina Gorge. Along the forested cliffs near the Canadian border, there's a sound that doesn't belong to wind or water, the sound of a woman crying. Locals call her the Weeping Widow of Pembina Gorge, a ghost said to mourn the loss of everything the valley once held. Her story begins in the 1860 seconds, when settlers pushed north and clashed with the local Métis and Ojibwe people. A farmer named John Larrabee built a homestead overlooking the gorge with his young wife, Eleanor. One night, during a violent raid rumored to be revenge for stolen land, their cabin burned. By dawn, John was dead, and Eleanor, driven half-mad, threw herself into the river. They say her body was never found. Not long after, travelers reported seeing a figure in white standing at the cliff's edge, weeping into the mist. Hunters spoke of soft sobbing that followed them through the trees. In 1910, a railroad worker swore a woman appeared beside the tracks, soaked and shivering, begging for her husband, then vanished when he reached out. Even today, hikers hear her voice echo through the gorge, rising and fading with the current. Skeptics say the gorge amplifies sound, that waterfalls and birds create illusions. But locals leave offerings of ribbons and river stones, hoping to soothe her grief. They say the widow cries not just for her husband, but for the land itself, for the forests cut, the rivers dammed, and the promises broken. And still, her sorrow drifts through the gorge, endless as the water below. Legend 9. The Devil's Run of Spiritwood Lake. Spiritwood Lake looks peaceful under the moon, but locals say when the wind shifts, the water turns main. For more than a century, people have whispered about a black carriage that skims across the lake's surface, pulled by horses made of smoke. They call it the Devil's Run. The story began in the late 1800s, when a wealthy rancher named Silas Rourke owned land near the lake. Known for cruelty and greed, Rourke cheated settlers and even stole from local churches. One night in 1889, He fled town after a fire destroyed his barn. His body was found days later in the lake, tangled in reeds, eyes wide open as if still running from something. Not long after, fishermen began hearing hooves pounding across the frozen water. By 1925, campers reported seeing a carriage blazing with red light racing the shoreline before vanishing into the fog. In 1982, 2 teenagers claimed a phantom coach nearly collided with their boat, leaving scorch marks on the hull. Skeptics talk about marsh gas, mirages, or headlights reflecting off the water. But locals believe the devil himself came for work and still rides the lake each year on the night of the fire. Every October, people swear they hear the whip crack and horses scream, and those foolish enough to shout back risk being chased. No one stays near Spiritwood after dark anymore. The lake's surface looks calm, but sometimes ripples form with no wind, like something racing just beneath, still running from judgment that never ends. The shadow of the old Mandan Hospital. On the western edge of Mandan stands a decaying red brick shell, the remains of the old street Alexius Hospital, closed since the 1952nd. Locals avoid it after dark. They say something still walks the hallways inside, something without form but full of intent. They call it the shadow. The hospital opened in 1915 and served miners and railroad workers through the influenza epidemic. Hundreds died there, many buried in unmarked graves behind the property. In 1938, a nurse named Clara Jensen fell down the elevator shaft during a night shift. Her death was ruled an accident, though staff whispered she'd been pushed by something unseen. Afterward, lights began flickering on empty floors, call bells rang with no patients attached, and a black figure appeared in the doorway of the morgue. In 1974, a group of teenagers broke in. Only one came out. He claimed a living shadow pinned him against the wall and whispered his name. Paranormal teams later recorded sudden drops in temperature and dark shapes caught on film, blocking light rather than reflecting it. Skeptics chalk it up to mold, asbestos, and suggestion. Yet even they admit the place feels wrong, heavy, like grief made tangible. The city plans to demolish it, but each attempt halts after strange equipment failures. They say Clara still walks the halls, followed by the thing that took her life. Others believe the shadow is something older, born from years of pain soaked into the brick. Either way, Mandan's old hospital remains sealed. But sealed things, history reminds us, never stay quiet forever. Legend 11. The Blue Lights of Fort Totten. On the Spirit Lake Reservation near Devil's Lake stands Fort Totten, a place built for defense, turned into a school, and remembered for silence that hums like a wound. At night, strange blue lights drift along its parade grounds, flickering like lanterns searching for someone who never came home. The fort was founded in 1867, later converted into a Native American boarding school. What was meant to civilize became an institution of cruelty. Children punished for speaking their language, families torn apart, names erased. Many never left. Their graves, unmarked and scattered, dot the edge of the property. The first reports of the lights came in the 1932nd. Soldiers stationed nearby saw glowing orbs weaving through the barracks, vanishing when approached. Visitors described them as pale and human-shaped, sometimes forming into lines as if marching. In 1989, a night guard said the air grew electric before a surge of blue flame raced across the floor. His flashlight melted in his hand. Scientists call it ball lightning or swamp gas, a quirk of moisture and minerals around Devil's Lake. Locals shake their heads. The Dakota people believe the lights are spirits of children trying to find their way home, their sadness turned visible. Tourists now visit the fort for ghost tours, snapping photos of the empty classrooms. Sometimes, blue streaks appear in the images, bending like hands reaching out. They say if you walk there at dusk, you'll feel warmth near those lights, like someone brushing past you. Maybe they're not haunting the fort at all, maybe they're still trying to leave. 12. The Haunted Bell of Jamestown College. At the top of a clock tower in Jamestown College hangs a bell that no one dares ring anymore. Students call it the bell that calls the dead. Its tone, deep and cracked, once marked victory, celebration, and graduation, until it started tolling on its own. The legend began in 1918, during the influenza pandemic. The college turned its dormitories into makeshift hospitals. A student nurse named Evelyn Crane tended the sick until she too fell ill. On the night she died, the bell rang 13 times, though the tower had been locked. The next morning, they found the rope worn through like something had pulled it from the other side. Since then, every time tragedies struck the campus, a fire in 1936, a drowning in 1962, a car crash in 1998, the bell rang again, always at midnight, always 13 times. Maintenance crews replaced the mechanism, disconnected the clapper, even sealed the hatch, but students still hear it echoing through the halls. In 2014, campus security recorded faint ringing during a thunderstorm, though the bell had no means to move. Skeptics insist it's vibration, metal resonance, or weather interference, but faculty who've heard it describe a sorrow so heavy it feels alive. Some claim Evelyn's spirit still keeps vigil, warning the living of what's to come.